So, hello everybody, here I'm back with my review of Mansions and Madness, 2nd edition, The Circle of Eternity, which is probably the one scenario that everybody calls the first scenario. It's supposed to last between, I believe, 90 minutes and 120 minutes. I think it took me pretty much, I would say probably more closer to 3 hours. You can play it with up to 5 investigators. I believe that this is the maximum number for all of the scenarios, although I've only ever played this one, and I've seen the Innsmouth scenario played out where they had 3 investigators, so I believe it's between 1 and 5. Mansions of Madness, 2nd edition, can only be played using the app, unlike the 2nd edition of Descent, where you can play opposed, where you still have the possibility of using the so-called Overlord phase and Overlord cards. Mansions of Madness 2nd edition does not come with that possibility. You have to use the app, so it's completely app-driven, fully cooperative, and it is, at the moment, it has, I believe, 4 scenarios with the base game, plus 2 if you have the tile sets, plus 1 DLC which you have to pay for, and at the moment it retails at €4.99 here in Ireland. And I believe it's $3.99 in the US and something like £3.99 in the UK. It's the first time that I've played Mansions of Madness. I don't have the 1st edition. I won't buy it because I don't like playing games opposed. I prefer playing cooperatively, so really the 1st edition is nothing for me. And how did I like it? Well, first of all, there is a full playthrough on my channel. I'm going to link to it so that you can actually, if you like, watch it. And of course, when you play any Arkham Files game, it's very difficult to see it in isolation without comparing it to the other Arkham Files games that FFG have put out. So I will compare it to Eldritch Horror first. And I have to say, the first thing that strikes me is that you don't have very many cards. I think between my 4 investigators, we may have had 10 cards. Some of which were so-called evidence cards, which you collect as you go through the story. You have very few starting items, which you cannot choose yourself. They are allocated to you by the app. And I was quite surprised, because it feels like when I play Eldritch that I have so many cards to contend with. Here, the number of cards was really small, and it was very easy. And the investigator cards with all of the supplements, like the insanity cards and the damage cards, or horror cards and damage cards, the footprint was really small, so it actually fit on a small box. So I was very surprised because I expected it to be a lot more fiddly, so it's a lot less fiddly than Eldritch Horror. Not that I don't like Eldritch Horror, I love the game, but it does come with plenty of tokens and chits to keep track of, not so in this game, or at least not in this scenario. When I first put together the investigator group, I did not do so randomly, but I chose them carefully because I realized, watching playthroughs by other people, none of whom I believe actually finished the scenario successfully. One of them hasn't finished it at all. He's still in the progress of playing, and I think the other group actually lost. I noticed that taking damage and taking horror is really problematic because unlike Arkham Horror, where you can go to the sanitarium or where you can go to you go to the church, I think, or the insane asylum and the hospital to heal yourself or to have some, psychological intervention happening, you can't. There is no such thing as going to a place where you can get rid of your damage or horror. And I noticed in the playthroughs that I watched that a lot of them went insane or died of their wounds because they were wounded and then they collected X number of additional damage, which meant that, the game ended after another turn. So I decided to have 2 investigators in my game. One Carolyn Fern that allows you to discard 1 horror, and Vincent Lee who allows you to discard 1 damage. However, what I was then surprised to see was that we got plenty of healing and plenty of anti-horror cards. We got the whiskey, we got the sedative, which is really powerful, a card which I hadn't seen yet in any of the playthroughs that I watched. We got the bandages and we got the medical texts. And here I have to question the smartness of the app, because the app should know, because you tell the app which investigators you have, what these investigators' specialties are. And I've seen people play without Carolyn and without Vincent, and they got hammered, and they didn't get any healing, and they didn't get any way to discard horror, which I thought is quite unfair, because the cards are there. Now you could say, okay, well, the idea is it's Lovecraft, and it's all, I guess, random. But if you have an app, I would expect it to be kind of a little smarter and ensure that if you don't have any of these investigators with you, that the healing and the anti-horror cards are given to you much more freely and much more quickly in the game. Because at the end of the day, you could end up losing over and over and over again. And it would also mean that certain combinations of investigators are invalidated from the outset, because you know, you will go insane or you will die of wounds, and then the game ends on the subsequent turn for everybody else, because the cards aren't really given to you and you don't have the right investigators, which would mean that on a 5 investigator game, Vincent Lee and Caroline Fern should always be there, because I think they're the only ones that can actually give you or heal you mentally or physically. Especially since you can't choose your starting equipment. So again, that's completely random. So I don't know if this is intentional or if people have just been unlucky, but if they have been unlucky, I would say this is one area of improvement for the app, that you can kind of balance it out, because while it is Lovecraftian and there is this idea of, oh, we can never win against the great old ones, a certain sense of achievement needs to be there, and people need to feel that, you know, yes, I can pit different sets of investigators against the mythos, and some may be more successful than others, but there is a slight possibility of success, because it limits your ability to play this game tactically. Since there is no sure healing, you can't go to the St. Mary's Hospital, or you can't go to whatever the name of the insane asylum in Arkham Horror is, and play it tactically and say, okay, so this guy needs healing, we're going to send him there on the next turn. You're completely reliant on whatever the app gives you, and the app puts a lot of time pressure on you, so you can't just go and explore. I would have expected to see maybe fewer healing cards in my game, considering that I've got Caroline and Vincent on the team, than in other combinations that I've watched played, where they just got totally hammered, where they didn't have these 2 characters and they didn't get enough or any healing cards. So I don't know if this is going to be worked on, but I think it would make sense. In general, the app played really well, although I have to say in the first 5 minutes of my first video it actually crashed and I had to redo it again, which is also why I know that the starting equipment is completely random, because when I redid it, the starting equipment was completely different. The app does not really distract from playing on the physical board. I was a bit unsure of that, but it doesn't, and it's actually really well integrated, and I really, really like what they've done with it. There are very few animations. You don't see yourself and you don't see the monsters on the app, so you really have to place them on the physical board, because somebody said, okay, can I play it without the board? No, you can't. Even if you had the board and had all of the information, you can't, because you don't see yourself in the rooms. It plays really smoothly. It has a nice touch to it. The narrative itself got kind of lost for me in this one, because it's basically go to the Vanderbilt estate, check out what happened to the owner of the building, he's missing and his butler called you, you know, so you kind of go looking. So it's like you just go to a probably haunted house you don't know, you go in there and you just start looking around. So it's a lot of exploration. It's a lot of, you know, like, okay, so what do we do here? We have no idea what's going on, so let's just go into all the different rooms and try to find as much information as possible. I've watched the Escape from Innsmouth one, which is very, very strongly based on A Shadow over Innsmouth by H.P. Lovecraft. And that one is so story-driven, and that one is so claustrophobic. And I can only recommend Tragic the Blatherings playthroughs of this one. It's brilliantly done. He plays it to the very end. And the story that unfolds is so dramatic. I can't really wait to play this one. It takes a long time, but it is really, really well done. And there you can see the narrative developing. There you can see, if you've read the story especially, you can really see how they've taken it and implemented it into this board game, and it's fantastic. This one is more of a generic, oh my god, the world is about to end, let's go in there and try and save the world. Although we have no idea what we're doing, but what could possibly go wrong? And that's well implemented, and it's short enough, and I can completely see why people would lose this. I played with 4 investigators to begin with. I saw somebody play with 2, and it's really tight and it's really tough, and people have said, okay, if I only play with 2 investigators, my house rule is you can take 3 actions per turn, not just 2 actions. I've got my own house rule, 2 house rules. One is a trade action is always free, and 2, you can pick up as many items in your space on 1 action as there are. I don't really say, okay, for each separate item you have to spend 1 additional action. I don't do it this way. So I made it a little easier for myself. Plus, I have to say, I rolled really well. I mean, usually I'm not very lucky with the dice. This time I was extremely lucky. So, you know, spoiler here, I won the game, but do watch it because I really like the ending. I really like, you know, there isn't a lot of animation, but there's a nice epilogue, and I think they really did a nice job. So, what do I think of the game? I think Circle of Eternity is a really good intro scenario. It teaches the rules really well without being a teaching scenario, unlike the trial scenario that you get with Descent 2nd Edition, which actually explains to you, okay, so here's where you sit, where you put the tokens, this is what you do, and then this is followed by that. But it is a very smooth story, which you can play without any prior knowledge. I feel Escape from Innsmouth is probably a lot less fun if you haven't read the book or the story it's based on, because it can get quite tedious. And I watched another playthrough where they basically said, okay, this was awful because I'm not going to give it away what they did, but first of all they lost, and secondly they felt, or one player felt, that she was just basically moving around point without a point. And there were things where they didn't do what I would have done, and I was like, yeah, you know, you should have done that, because there is this guy, and I'm not going to give it away, it's a big spoiler, but if you've read it, there is an NPC, and he's kind of obscure, but if you've read the story, you know you should be talking to this guy, and they didn't, and they missed a very important clue. Anyway, I can only recommend Mansions of Madness 2nd edition. I have got both tile sets. Do I recommend them? Yes, I do. First of all, it's nice to get all of these tiles. I haven't even unwrapped them because they're not required for the first scenario. But they also unlock 2 additional scenarios for free. I think one is called Dearly Departed, and the other one is called Ritual on Sentinel Hill, but don't quote me on that. You don't need them for the DLC, which just became available this past week, just for Christmas. But I think that they add quite a lot of addition and variety to it. And in my playthrough, you will see that I actually say, okay, this is a monster that doesn't come from the base game, that comes from the additional tile set. So they are using them even in the first scenario, although without the tiles themselves, they use them with the monsters. So 2 thumbs up, keep gaming. I hope that when I upload this one, it'll come out in HD, because the last 2 sit-downs that I did for Arkham Horror, the LCG, and Nature's Eye Descent 2nd edition, for some reason had a resolution of 144p, and it looks like I'm talking to you from beyond, which I'm not. So hopefully this will come up in HD, and I'll talk to you soon. And for everybody who's been following my channel this year, I will do a 2016 review just in time for the 31st of December, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.